And I'm sure that the Tisch side of the partnership had a lot to do with this as well, because I don't believe that Steve Tisch, and this is, again, I don't have any inside information on this, but I don't believe he was in the final meeting with John Mara and Joe Judge when Joe Judge was hired, meaning that everything that Joe Judge had been saying, especially if you go back and I went back and listened to that 11-minute diatribe, he is basically saying in that diatribe everything that I think John Mara wanted to hear from their initial meetings and final sit-downs, saying, look, we got guys with golf clubs in front of their lockers. We have guys that have basically packed it in. We have had guys that have quit on, the previous coach, Pat Shurmur, and I bet you that's what John Mara was saying to Joe Judge. And Joe Judge
saying, hey, I don't have any of that in my locker room on my watch.
Right, because, and if you remember, John Mara also said when they hired Joe Judge, I don't want to overreact. I want to support the coach. We got to get some stability around here, and we got to get some pride back. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why John Mara struggled with all of this stuff, because he knows what he said to Joe Judge. Joe Judge knows exactly what John Mara wanted when he hired him, and that's usually what happens. Coaches come in, and they clean up the mess that's left behind. Tom Coughlin did that for Jim Fossil. You remember Jim Fossil at the end of his time here, he was supposedly a soft players coach. That was the argument as to why you would fire him, even though he took the team to the Super Bowl. So Tom Coughlin comes in. He's the anti-Jim Fossil, and he's tough. And then he has to be told when he's here in the beginning, look, you got to back off. You got to give the players some space. Remember, they set up the whole player council thing, and then that kind of worked. And then they won 2 Super Bowls. Do you remember when Tom Coughlin was unceremoniously let go when he walked off the podium?
Yeah,
did he
right
shake
past
the hand of John Mara?
That's right, he did not.
And then they gave it to Ben McAdoo, who was dressed like the Dutch paint boy when he got introduced. And then the next year he came back with a slick hairdo and supposedly a whole new personality. And then he was the one that benched Eli Manning for Geno Smith, and he was the one that wanted Patrick Mahomes. So he couldn't, fight through the dysfunction of the Giants. And then they get rid of him. And then they bring in Pat Shurmur, who's probably one of the nicest people in the NFL. He could be one of the nicest people in the NFL. Put him right in the mix of this whole thing, forget it. He gets chewed up and he gets spit out. And then the players overrun him. And so what does John Mara want from Joe Judge? He wants the Belichickian way of doing things. Maybe it's not Bill Belichick, but he wants what Bill Belichick has created up in New England, just like the Lions wanted it, just like the Miami Dolphins wanted it from Nick Saban.
You can go on and on and on.
Nick Saban and Brian Flores,
right.
Just like Mangini was supposed to bring to the Jets, just like Romeo Crennel was supposed to bring to the Browns, just like Bill O'Brien was supposed to bring to the Texans. Josh McDaniels was supposed to bring to the Browns. Here's the thing. Belichick has got that thing so on lockdown up there in New England. He basically runs the ship. He makes the decision on the players. He runs the practices. He runs the meetings. He has all the rules set in place, and the success speaks for itself. When you ask one of those guys to come off of that staff, they're not dumb. They still know how to coach players. They know how to get in the face of players and be tough on players. What they can't fight through ultimately is the true dysfunction of the organizations that they are asked to take over.
And then a big reason here was the general manager was a terrible GM, and Joe Judge inherited a lot of the mistakes from Dave Gettleman and couldn't survive a GM change because there's nobody out there who's going to come and take this job to take a lame duck coach and then set himself back an entire year when he's trying to remake the organization.
So Joe Judge talked himself off the plank. Because I'm in total 100% lockstep with you when you said, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think he's coming back. And then it came the diatribe, then came the quarterback sneaks. And, the quarterback sneaks actually worked in the game, as he tried to point out. But the perception of the quarterback sneaks and then the social media reaction to the quarterback sneaks. And then, of course, Aaron Rodgers taking a shot at the quarterback sneaks. And by the way, I would tell Aaron that if he were the quarterback of the Giants, they wouldn't ask you to take a quarterback sneak on a 3rd and 9. You talk about Jake Fromm and somebody that they didn't want to throw an interception return for a touchdown, as he did right after that. So, from a football standpoint, I think he was sending a message to, maybe the owners that, look at what I got to play with here. but it might have been a wise strategy, but the better strategy would have been just to hand it to a running back and let him get the yard.
Yeah,
or
nobody
not
would have
get
been
it.
talking about it.
Nobody would have been talking about it. So, Gio, I've been here since 2007 as a co-host in the morning when I started with Craig.
Yeah.
It is now it's 2022. In the four major sports, how many head coaches do you think I've been through and had to cover?
Oh, my God.
For the four major sports, the Yankees and the Mets, the Jets and the Giants, the Knicks and the Nets, the Rangers, Isles, and Devils. How many coaches do you think I have seen come and go to this point right now?
It's got to be close to 20, somewhere in there. Why don't you just tell me?
49.
49. Oh, my God.
49.
49.
Managers or head coaches.
Jesus.
For basically, the 9 teams that are here. So the Yankees have been through 3. Mm-hmm. The Mets have been through 6. Now, I'm not counting interim coaches either or managers.
Okay, just guys who actually...
Except for one who actually did have a winning record and did coach a bulk of the season. That's P.J. Carlissimo, who did it for the Nets. So the Yankees had 3. The Mets have had 6. The Jets have had 5. So I started with Randolph, Manuel, Collins, Callaway, Rojas, now Showalter. The Jets, Mangini, Ryan, Bowles, Gase, and Sala. Mm-hmm. The Giants, Coughlin, McAdoo, Spagnola. I'm not really counting Spags because he only had a couple games at the end of the season. Shermer, Judge, and now the next one's coming.
Next guy.
The Rangers have had Rennie, Torts, Vigneault, Quinn, and Gallant. The Isles had Nolan, Gordon, Capuano, Waite, and Trotz. The Devils had Julian Sutter, Lemaire, McLean, DeBoer, Hines, and now Lindsey Ruff. The Knicks have had Isaiah Thomas, D'Antoni, Woodson, Fisher, Hornacek, Fizdale, and Thibodeau. And the Nets, Frank, Johnson, Carlissimo, as I put on this list because it was almost the full year, Kidd, Hollins, Atkinson, and now Nash.
You could add the WFAN midday show to that list as well. How many different permutations there have been since
exactly. I mean, so it's amazing, and I always preach stability. The Yankees are the most stable franchise. They're also probably the most popular franchise. I guess football, the Giants are probably right there with them. But Torrey, Girardi, and Boone, and Torrey they didn't re-up. And Girardi, they didn't re-up. Essentially, they didn't fire those guys. They let their contracts run out, and then they brought in Boone. And there's only been one general manager during that time with the Yankees. That's a whole nother list that I don't even want to get into. But when you think of the Bill Belichick list, you got Romeo Crennel, Josh McDaniels, Eric Mangini, Nick Saban, 2 years in Miami, fell on his face. Matt Patricia, 2 years in Detroit. Brian Flores, 3 years in Miami. Bill O'Brien was really the most successful one. 7 years with the Texans, 52-48, got them into the playoffs, I think, 4 years. And now Mike Vrabel was more under Bill O'Brien. He played for Bill Belichick, but he was a coach under Bill O'Brien at the Texans. And he's most likely, I think, going to be probably the leading candidate for AP Coach of the Year this year in the NFL. So I think all of these guys are really, you put the staff together, you probably have a pretty good staff.
But none of them can be a head coach.
It's not that they can't be a head coach, it's that they can't overcome the dysfunction of these NFL franchises and the people that work within them. And there is a permutation of just, I'm changing with the wind. I'm just going to, and I think both of us agree that Joe Judge walked himself off the plank and should have been fired. I can't make an argument to say they needed to keep Joe Judge. I don't know the conversation that he had with John Mara 2 years ago, but I'm sure that conversation was like, hey, you got to clean up this locker room. We got to get this team tougher. I can't have guys with golf clubs in front of their lockers the last 2 weeks of the seasons, and I don't need the trailers packed up and ready to go and all that other crap because, Pat Shurmur was too nice of a guy. I need a more heavy-handed coach, and that's probably what John Mara wanted. But I would imagine that Steve Tisch probably told John Mara, we can't keep this guy here. Our fans are going crazy.
Well, there's two major things he couldn't overcome, which was average quarterback play and injuries to the quarterback position and a general manager who was the pits. He couldn't overcome those two things. Now, it's almost impossible to overcome those two things, but there's ways you could do it if the team had played just a little bit better down the stretch, if he gotten anything out of them, if he didn't talk for 11 minutes and 50 seconds and trash everybody and do what he did, he might have been able to hang on to his job, but a new general man. I really believe that when they started reaching out to some of these candidates, they found out quickly that you could not hang on to the head coach, and a start over is absolutely the only way that they could go. I mean, how many times did we say that you have to have the GM and the head coach on the same page? And if you hired a general manager and paired him with Joe Judge because you really believed in Joe Judge, it was only going to be a matter of time. It was going to be another McCagnon-Adam Gase situation once again, where the whole thing completely blows up in your face, and then you're putting yourself back years and years and years because you hung on to a guy too long.
Yeah, so we are in agreement this morning when we come in here that the Giants are going to do this the right way. So the general manager will lead the search for the coach. Of course, the owners will be the one who will hire the coach. The general manager, I hope, has say over the roster, and whoever he brings in as a coach is a good communicator to the media. It's important to be a good communicator to your players here. I think like Rob Saleh handled himself very well this year. I really do. There was really no controversy around anything. A couple things he said about Zach Wilson, we all kind of rolled our eyes. But then again, he's a coach protecting his players. We understand that. He never really said anything that we didn't expect or that was shocking or didn't have to go and defend himself or the way that they're doing things over there. Because I'd like to think as football fans and people who've either played football or watched football their entire life and love the game, we all see it the way that we want to see it, that it seems like the Jets are heading in the right direction. I heard Brandon and Tiki talking about this yesterday, and Brandon's a huge Jet fan. He's like, I kind of like where my team is right now because I feel like I have some idea of where they're trying to go to. And I agree with Brandon 100%. The Giants now, because of all the money that they've spent over the last couple of years, especially last year in free agency, their cap situation, a couple of their draft picks, I'm sure that Joe Judge couldn't stand. I can't imagine that when Kadarius Tony shows up in practice with one shoe, that Joe Judge finds that at all funny.
Well, yeah, of course, because especially with the way that everybody wanted that draft to go, where Devontae Smith was supposed to be the guy, and then the Eagles jump ahead
you look
of
at
the Giants of the trade with the Dallas Cowboys.
The wide receivers that were available in the first round, and the Giants ended up taking Kadarius Tony, who, by the way,
I still think could be pretty.
He has a lot of Tyreek Hill in him on the field. There's no question about that. The question is, is he distracted off the field by his other stuff that he wants to do? He wants to be a singer or a rapper, whatever you want to call it. He wants to be in that world as well. And what does that do to the football side of it? And how difficult is it to coach a young man that has bigger interest off the field? I don't care what it is, by the way. It doesn't matter whether it's acting. It doesn't matter whether it's rapping, singing, piano playing. It doesn't matter. If that's a big portion of his life, coaches don't want players to be distracted away from the game. They want them to be all in all the time. And I think the mindset for these Belichick coaches that have failed in certain places is they have an all-in mindset, and they cannot in any way, shape, or form break through the dysfunction of these NFL teams and bring that mindset to these organizations. It only works because it's Belichick, and it only works because of Belichick's overall coaching record and the way that he does things in New England.
Now, I could be wrong about this. You bring up Kadarius Tony, reminded me of something, so I do follow him on Instagram. So there's a cartoon. He posts a cartoon picture of himself, okay? And he's got the Joker necklace on. And the picture is of him, like, basically ripping off one shirt with another shirt underneath. And the other shirt underneath is another blue shirt with a yellow number 3 on it. Now, the reason why this is interesting to me...
That's a Odell Beckham jersey from maybe the Rams?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, so this is it right here. Is that a message like, free me like Odell got freed?
I'm just telling you right now.
Is that what that is?
I wish, and they'll never do it because the coaches are always worried about their reputations and they're always worried about where their next job is coming from.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there were major disagreements on certain players that what's his name, brought in, the general manager Dave Gettleman brought in. I'm sure that there were major disagreements, and he's probably one of them. And the thing about it is he can't stay healthy. They couldn't stay healthy. That's another problem with this team. Between them and the Jets and the amount of guys that both teams have gotten injured and have lost for long patches of the season or put them on IR like Gates and Lemieux, you never see him again. And there's this misnomer out there, whatever misnomer I believe, that Dave Gettleman didn't fix the offensive line. Well, it wasn't because he didn't try to fix the offensive line. He spent draft capital. He spent free agent money on the best available people that were at the time free agents. Remember, these coaches also had to coach through pandemics with lousy quarterback play. I mean, every coach that got fired has all the same things in common. They have no quarterback to speak of. Maybe Brian Flores had a little bit of a presence at quarterback, but they never have a quarterback to speak of. And then when you look at the 14 teams that are in our playoffs that start this week, almost every single one of them has a quarterback that played 16 games or at least was there for the bulk of the season and actually had a decent season.
Well, that's why, Joe Judge, we both said it. Moving on from Joe Judge and starting over, probably the right thing to do. But I do feel like it was impossible for anybody to overcome the circumstances in which he found himself in.
Yeah, and then, of course, again, so Aaron Rodgers now decides to go after this whole situation here. Mm-hmm. He has no clue as to what had happened here and how the whole thing unfolded and what was going on. And does he realize that quarterback that was playing went out there almost in not the same situation. He was a little bit further away from the goal line and threw a pick six. They know who they had. They knew who they're playing with. And by the way, Joe Judge did not ask for Jake Fromm. Joe Judge is trying to coach a team.
Yeah, we both didn't like the third.
But what I'm saying is it's the pro personnel people that said, there's a quarterback available on the Buffalo Bills roster, and we can take him. He's probably the best guy to bring in here. Now, when you bring him in here, you're not thinking that he's playing because you're thinking Glennon's playing. Mm-hmm. And then Glennon can't play, and then he gets hurt.
Yep.
And then you have no choice but to go to this guy because you don't have anybody on your roster to go to.
And it's part of the reason why you're out of a job.
And it's another reason why when you run a sneak on third down.
But we both hated it that morning.
Everybody hated it.
It's not like we can't sit here and defend it now.
No, I'm not defending it. I wish he just would have handed it off.
Yeah.
And then just punted from that point in time. The other thing, one thing I've learned sitting with Coach Cowher over the last 15 years, he goes, Boomer, sometimes these guys forget. And in this case, Joe Judge didn't forget. He just ran the wrong play. But sometimes these coaches forget that a punt is okay. A punt's a good thing. Field position's still a very big part of this game. And I think he was really talking to Brandon Staley, the coach of the Chargers, that, is Mr. Analytics and Mr. I'm going for it all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that he ran that play and then it became, social media fodder for everything. So I'm not surprised. I wasn't surprised yesterday. Remember I was telling you yesterday that they still have more than enough time to fire Joe Judge. Mm-hmm. We're not even to the playoffs yet. And they're already lining up GM candidates. And I think you do have something when you say that a general manager was not going to want to work with a bristling coach like Joe Judge. There was no way. Unless he had some sort of, contact and relationship with him before he got here. And then all of a sudden, if he comes in and the two of them are like in the situation again next year, then they're blowing everybody out again.
Right, absolutely. If you are someone, especially some of these candidates who are young, up-and-coming front office guys who finally get your opportunity, if you're going to leave the job that you have now to jump ship and be the man, you want to be able to hire your own coach. Everybody would.
I'll tell you a couple of guys that have been fired from the Giants front office. They're not afraid to take shots at people.
Oh, sure.
I'll tell you that. They're throwing howitzers out there left and right about the way that the dysfunction of the Giants now is all of a sudden taken over this franchise. And quite frankly, John Mara's the face. He's the one that's making all these decisions. I do think this is probably I'm going to say more like, percentage-wise. I don't know if it's a 80-20 percentage-wise, but I got to believe that the Tisch side of this whole equation was very loud in this particular room, especially after they met with Judge yesterday or 2 days ago, and then had their meetings amongst themselves. And then Mara ultimately meets with Judge and tells him that he's no longer here.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.